I'll jump straight into it actually. So I've been coming down here since I was about 15 surfing this coast, and it's so easy to think of Aireys as the beach and back to the Great Ocean Road. And it's only when I joined a group that Nan's up there, that Nan was on, and lots of other people on, Charlotte was on. My apologies to all the other people here who are on it and I haven't mentioned. But Lecky is there, and sorry, I almost jumped over you, Lecky. But it's much more than that. There's this amazing valley that used to be a long connection of wetlands all along the valley between the eastern side running along Bamborough Road and the western side with Bimba down up the hill. And it's so easy not to notice that, but it's a really key part of the valley, and I think that's what we really concentrate on, the Painkalac Valley Network. Rod's sitting there, you know, who really runs that. And this is after a big rain in 2018, and you can see, despite 200 years of compacting the ground, which really leads to water sheeting off straight into the creek, causing flooding problems, 200 years of creating drains and filling in wetlands, despite all that effort, it's still a chain of wetlands when it gets really wet. And so what we're going to talk about is, I like this, my pointing fingers as a shadow, is this area up here. So this is one of our motivations for Jacinta and myself to purchase the land, was this great big wetland that comes up after a decent rain. You can see this is actually a little tributary that comes in off from Painkalac, from the Distillery Creek into this area, and it will flood up to, not quite, but about a hectare, so it's quite big. But it's not just that, of course, it's the whole area. You can see it stretches right down to the coast with a split point down there and exits into the estuary, the barrier, and then into the sea. So it's this lovely long wetland that isn't really functioning like that now, but we thought it'd be great to get a bit of it working. And part of it's proof of principle, because a lot of people thought that you couldn't really re-establish it there. You know, so the question is, can we get nature to return and take over? And one of the assessments of have we been successful is when we don't have to do much, but nature does it for us. Is nature operative here again, rather than us constantly intervening? I'll let you judge that. So here we are. That last photo was in September after a major rain event. Here we are in February, and you can see there's really not much nature there. There's not much biodiversity. Almost all the grass, and this big areas in here, a capeweed that's died off, are exotic. There's not much in there, and the little bit of greenery, which you might think, well, that's good, there's some greenery. Yeah, it's kikuyu, so unfortunately, not such something to have a lot of joy over. And just a quick photo to show you. So the lot 2 is sort of this area here. This is the big wetland area up to Bamborough Road and all the way down here along the Painkalac Creek. So that's before we did anything. And you also see very nicely, one of the reasons we really like this block was nature's very disconnected across the valley. The valley's been cleared. It's obviously heavily grazed, a lot of kangaroos in there, which is fantastic, but a lot of animals and things can't move across, especially small mammals, small birds and things find it hard. So what we loved about this was it was a great corridor, an east-west corridor across from Bimbadeen and up into the National Park and over to Bamborough and up in that lovely wooded area there too. And wouldn't we love to get a north-south corridor as well, which we'll be talking about a little bit. So we harnessed a lot of free work. This is really good. Get people to work here for free. This is Jacinta, my wife, who's the co-owner. So that was very easy to get her to work for us for free. Now, I should say all these people actually wanted to. There was no slavery involved. Nan's got a big smile on her face because she did a lot of work. There's so many people here did. I'm not going to say who was there because so many people were here. And I always thought it was fun, and we got a bit of carrot cake and a chat and coffee at the end, but I'm not sure it was it was quite as easy as my memory. But you can see this is in 2019, again, that wetland, and we're starting to fill it in with all these native plants. So I've got to mention Wendy here, who's Rod's partner, who was always on the mulch. She's the queen of mulch. She's there for years and years with that mulch. I think she must be disappointed we don't need much mulch nowadays. But we also put in a big grassland. We scraped back all the seed bank, put in native grasses, put up that fence because the roos came in and would just destroy our native grass. You know, who would have known that kangaroos like native grass? And they would absolutely go for that grass before any of the other grasses. You know, all the imported fog and ryegrass and sweet vernal grass, not that interested compared to the native grass. Anyway, we managed to get it established. So we took it from not much with regard to native indigenous vegetation to this great big area here of grassland. So this is our native grassland. Here's a nice little walkway. We've got little copse of swamp gums here. There's a little bit of water here, but it does flood all the way out. And all this planting here came back by itself. But we did all that planting 2023. It's still growing brilliantly, just coming up more and more. But one of the keys to success, I think, is having all this grassland as well. So we've re-established it. As I said, what we're really trying to achieve is to bring nature back in. So how do we define that? So we're sort of moving from planting and having it growing to maturing it. But we have to see, you know, isn't nature coming back? So the most important thing, and the thing I've learned that I love the most, and I've got to point out Bron here, because she's so good at, you and Katie are always down there taking photos and sending them to me, is it's so easy to walk through the landscape and not observe things. I mean, this could be a paradigm on how we go through life, I realise, but you know, I won't extend it, but a metaphor for life. But it's so easy to go through and not notice things, and now I can't walk past a bit of poo on the ground with having a good look to see what it is, you know. Who put that there? I'll let you off, we haven't got any pictures of scats in here. But I do have a good look, and I do have access to a book called What Scat Is That?, which I could highly recommend. Anyway, so you walk around and you see these little runnel things here, which are where animals are running along underneath, and then you start to understand why are they building this? Because they're herbivores. They can't get enough nutrition at night, so they've got to also graze during the day. And to do that, if they're above ground, they're predated on. So they have these little areas they go underneath, and they also dig like this. And so you start noticing that everywhere. You start to understand why they're doing it, but the other great thing is you understand that one of the big problems with the valley has been it's been so compacted, because Australia doesn't have, and I know I'm telling you things you know, we don't have animals that have hooves. We have animals that have pads on their feet. All our mammals and marsupials, obviously mammals. So it's very compacted from hooved animals. So these things, these so-called ecological engineers or environmental engineers, they're breaking it up, they're opening it, and then water can get in, and seed can get in, and we can get germination. It's very hard to germinate on Kikuyu. It's much easier when it's been all turned around. And here's some little swamp rats, which are the animals that have dug these. And there's a little albino one. There's very few albino native Australian mammals, and there's a lovely little albino swamp rat, which are incredibly rare apparently, but showed up on one of our cameras. You can see the other swamp rat up the front, up the top there. We get schools coming down, and I love it when the schools come down, because the kids come in, they're normally year 12 or year 11, and they're very reserved at the beginning. And as you walk around and go around with the schools, they become less reserved. And what's great is whilst people won't ask a question in a group, as you go around, the kids who are really into nature will sort of come up next to you and ask questions and make comments. And the dynamic changes enormously in the hour or two. It's a really lovely thing to observe. because they're getting in contact with something which is so easy to get in contact with, which is nature. You know, our brains have evolved forever to be in contact with nature, and you really observe it. So this was North Geelong Secondary College, and we've always got to give them a project. So one was, we got them in teams to do little transects going across here to look for the runnels and also the little holes, so where the swamp rats were. So, and then I got all their transects and mapped them out. This is across the Billabong and goes from here. We've since done more, and in fact, the whole place, when I walk around, I think, oh, here's one there, there's another one. When you actually do the survey, you find the place is just covered with them, but they're also protean. They change all the time. Where there was one, suddenly now it's no longer used. It's all compacted down, but there's a new one over here. They're just turning over all the soil. It's fantastic to see. The other thing about nature is people tend to focus on these iconic species. Koalas, I won't list them off. But I think the real joy is to observe and value and get excited about every little thing. Like these little Christmas spiders are so beautiful. Look at that. They're great. This is the in the Billabong when there's some frog spawn, the frogs, an embrygum caterpillar. Oh, this one I love. This, I think someone mentioned this before. These are short-finned eels. So when the Billabong filled up and we got all those short-finned eels, you realise that, of course, before they were all drained, all these wetlands, the eels would go into it. You know, the eels go over the sand at the berm. The eels go up into the well up into the valley. They used to come into the wetlands as well, of course. And I know that because when it drained out, I went down there one day and thought, oh my God, there's a snake in there. So I'm sort of like standing off to the side and there's more snakes. Suddenly it's like snakes on a plane. There's snakes everywhere. And then of course I realised there were eels, and I've counted 16 short-finned eels. Within the week, all gone. They've all gone back over into the creek as it's all evaporated and the ephemeral wetland is no longer wet. There's a beautiful photo of a golden cisticola. Hopefully I said that properly, Bron. But just such a beautiful bird and such a great photo. I just think it's such a great photo. And that's on one of our Juncus pallidus, which came back from itself. And when you see that, you think the bird couldn't be there, wouldn't have anything to live on unless we let this come back. It's a really joyful thing to observe. Just being observant, so you go down there and you see all these different animals coming back, as well as having the kangaroos. Here are two, a swamp wallaby, Bennett's red-necked wallaby, and these beautiful skinks. There was a survey done by the Geelong field naturalists, and I was so impressed by going down there and seeing how they roll things. They always roll it towards them in case it's a snake, because they roll the way the snake's going to come this way. So I thought that was a good thing to learn. Glad they taught me that. And all the little skinks and things they'd find there, because I was always looking for lizards, but they're so good at finding them. To track them, what we've been doing is using lots of cameras. So these are motion activated. They've also got flashes on them, so put them out at night. And these are to trap them, actually live trapping. Now, you need a special license to do that, but Professor Barbara Wilson and Professor Mark Carlos and also someone in the field nats have that. So we've done trapping, we've done camera work, and it was a really special moment when they live trapped a swamp antechinus, as you know, a threatened species, something that's very special to our valley. It's a nationally listed special threatened species, and it had arrived on the block. We're not quite sure how it got there, and that great little saying, build it and they would come, just so seemed to work. You know, we just provided the environment, and then Mark and Barbara were thinking about trapping something and putting them there, but suddenly they were just there. And this is months later underneath the kangaroo apple. Here's another one. If I do this, it might actually... Oh, there we go. See it running away? Beautiful. So the funny thing is perception. So beforehand, these kangaroo apples, which are native and we'd planted, started going all the way, all through our wetland, I started thinking, I don't like that. You know, they're filling up the wetland. I like the Juncus pallidus. I'm totally going against my own belief, which is we just facilitate nature, nature decides. I actually went and took some out. And then when they filmed that swamp antechinus underneath the kangaroo, I'm like, I love kangaroo apples. I want more kangaroo apples. And I was so bereft that I'd take one out only like a week beforehand. And of course, the reason they love kangaroo apples is they're really low. They go right to the ground. They've got great food source because the kangaroo apples drop and they're so prolific. And it's protected from predators very well. They're not out in the open. So we do have a lot of kangaroo apple down there. With the cameras, we put out a bait, and that's this little swamp rat having a nice little sniff around there. And this is interesting. So lately we've started getting these all over the block. And so some very old friends of ours, their daughter, Gabby, whom I've known from the day she was born, has just finished her PhD. And what's it on? Long-nosed bandicoots. And we thought there's a long-nosed bandicoots. So she was down on Wednesday afternoon. She lives up in Sydney. And she came down, and I didn't even tell her what I thought they were. She just goes, oh, you've got long-nosed bandicoots. So we've got some cameras out on these at the moment. The problem is they don't come back to the same place. It's not a burrow. They're going around looking for truffles and things. So that was fantastic to see her, that she thought that's what we had there. And as well as putting the cameras out on the block, we're of course very interested in the Painkalac. As somebody said before, you know, just because we draw a boundary, for us it's 10 metres from the creek because the council owns the rest of it. But, you know, nature doesn't know there's a boundary there. Nature doesn't have the boundary maps. So we put cameras out into those areas too. And here's a fantastic big ricali, or swamp rat. They're quite long, but that's the body and that's with the tail, with a little white tip at the tail. And there's quite a lot. There's 3 or 4 burrows that I know of along there. And they pick up on there as well. And if I sneak down really quietly to one part of the creek just before dusk and really careful not to make any noise, I'll see one or hear it plop in just as I get there. So if anyone's willing to be very quiet, you can join me one day. I can't promise I'll be there, but they're frequently there. The other survey, of course, they said it's not all about mammals, and it's so this is put up by John Loughnan, and it's a moth trap. We don't really trap the moths, they just go onto the surface. And here's a lovely big Helena moth. So it's actually sitting on a leaf. Nature's so beautiful. I mean, that's the big moth. And it's a dark sky thing. So tragically, I understand one of the reasons we don't have a lot of these big moths around now is because when they hatch and there's a bright light, they go to the bright light and die before they breed. So we put out one of these traps. Not this was actually at the top. Another one right down the bottom, and this is where we found them. And there's lots of them. And now, of course, I can see the cocoons. So the dark sky is so important because, you know, the moths and the insects, well, all the birds, everything lives together. Nothing's in isolation. So it was really lovely to see that we had those on the block. And I just want to say as well, too, that as well as all these great animals coming in, these are different species of plants that are coming in. We've got about 20 species of plants, native local plants that we haven't planted that have just come in by themselves, which has been so beautiful to see. So we've got epilobium there, which has got this beautiful little purple flower. This is enormous. There was one that was 80 centimetres across. It's Boletus, giant Boletus. It's the biggest fungus in Australia. There were 4 there last week. But when I went down with Gabby, our friend who's the long-nosed bandicoot expert, they've really been affected. They started to fall away a bit. But there were 4 down the bottom of the block. All this Juncus species come back by itself. This is loose strife, which is a really beautiful little annual herbaceous plant that comes in on the floor of the billabong as it dries out. It's very beautiful. And lots of native raspberry. So all these plants that are coming back by themselves. So what we're doing has really changed from planting to supporting nature. So the aim is that in the end we don't support nature at all. Nature does everything. but we do need support at the moment. So one of the key things we're doing is feral predator control. I put out a camera last week. I picked this one up on Thursday. We was actually looking for long-nosed bandicoots, and you know, beautiful animal, such a beautiful animal. Looks a bit like, you know, my son's dog, who's a Kelpie, but that's not where it should be. So we've got a shooter coming down, might do some baiting even. We know exactly where it is. So every night, this is out for 4 nights. Bron's nodding because she's involved in the feral animal control. We say control, not eradication, because it's impossible to eradicate at the moment. But we know exactly where it is, so we should hopefully be able to get it. So we're moving it towards the nature coming back. These bird, bat and glider boxes, although this looks more like an art project than a box, I can't believe that was an accident. They were just making a box, because this is Geo and Sophie especially, and Jonty, who's a local. So we put, that's for blue-winged parrots, that's for gangs, that's for gliders, and there's some for microbats as well. So we're putting those up there because they need hollows in trees, and one of the things we don't have are a lot of hollows there. So we're helping out whilst we need to. At some stage, hopefully we won't need to. Basking rocks, so we've got a lot of basking rocks from up in Bamber Road, the local rock up there. What's his name? Steve Duff, who runs it. I think he didn't quite believe when I said, I just want the bits you can't sell for landscaping, so I want them cheap. And I think he thought that I was just trying to get some cheap landscaping rocks, so he insisted on delivering them and came down. But he didn't quite believe we're just going to throw them down on the ground. But when he saw it, he's actually really good and gave me an extra discount, so it was very kind of him. And what we did was, before we put them down, we dug underneath for reptiles, which is another way of saying snakes. So of course, there's this big red-bellied black snake that lives right in the middle now. I can find it pretty easily. Unfortunately, the other day, it was that close before I picked it up, because it wasn't on the rock, it was in the grassland. They're very dangerous, very venomous, but apparently they don't often bite. So what we've also done is, hasn't bitten me so far, but we also plant, so very strategic planting. You can see in the background there's some planting there. That's where we have really nice low vegetation around the edge of the grassland for things to get into before they get eaten by birds or foxes. But we also put these carrots up there, so they're big carrots are prey, so they get quite big, just to provide protection for reptiles and things as they come out from around the rocks, and the rocks are basking. So really thinking, how can we enhance this as habitat rather than just planting at the moment? So we're also putting out, I've got 3 of these for our local birders. Here's Katie and Bron pretending to be very observant there. I think it must have been taken with one of the iPhones, was it? And the other thing is we've put out quite a lot of logs and things. They're really important for the skinks, the insects, little animals, to have places to go to as refuge over the block. So we put out quite a few of those as well. The other thing we're really interested in are traditional burns, and we've had people from the local Wadawurrung TOs down there a few times. This is Blair Gilson. He did a little burn there. You can see this is a time when there's a lot of dead grass around here. So that's all Microlina, the native weeping grass. It burns quite well. We did a bit of a burn last year, and Gabby, who came down, who does the long-nosed bandicoots, she has worked in Sydney and a lot in Arnhem Land on burns and advised us. So what we want to do is work with the TOs, CFA, and do some burns soon. Just little small mosaic burns, maybe 40 square metres, so we don't singe any of our small mammals. Just small mosaic burns across there, just to enhance things, because the one we did last year, which was only about 15 square metres, it's one of the best looking parts of the grassland now. The little flat weeds, you know, the cat's paw and plantain and things, just didn't come up in that area. I think we singed the seed, but everything else is looking great. So I've got to talk to the CFA, we'll get those down there probably with an appliance, and do that pretty soon, and do 10, 20 little burns across the area. Anyone who wants to come down is very welcome. It's really interesting to see it, and it's a very slow little creep. But anyway, we're definitely going to be doing some soon, but we've just got to sort it out with the CFA. So just finishing now. So why do this? Other than the fact that it's one of the most joyful things you can do. So why do you need another reason? But it's that biodiversity. So as I've been going through, you know, all those things that come back where there was pretty much nothing, threatened native species, it's a great way to sequester carbon. Those wetlands and soil sequestration is so important. The other thing which I think is really important in Aries is water quality. So if the water just sheets across the grassland, pasture land, it goes across very quickly. It doesn't penetrate very well. In fact, it's a massive increase in the amount of groundwater penetration by having these sort of open grassland areas rather than pasture that is compacted. It's something like 50-fold amount of water that goes in. So not only do we get cleaner water, because it gets filtered going through our wetland that has junker species in it, things that really clean the water up with a biofiltration. It retards water going in, it increases water going into the water table, and it reduces peak flood flow. There's lots of studies you can read about these natural systems where it reduces peak flood flow downstream. So really great way to get the valley healthier, but also to address some of the issues downstream. With the planting, we've gone to what is proving a harder area, but this is council land. You can see that's the coast down there, a bit further along. It's coming along pretty well despite having really a couple of dry months. And I've got to really thank the council for their support with helping with this. And Gabrielle O'Shea's not here, but she's the council officer and she's so wonderful and she's done so much work herself. A lot of these plants along here are ones that Gabrielle's done and she's connected it through. We've actually got a grant for next year to help create that corridor along the edge. So we're working very closely with council on council land to try and improve all the way down along the creek to get those sort of benefits. And my very, very last two slides. First off, I won't go through this, but so many people to thank, but especially the two key organisations that have been absolutely the mainstay for us have been Angair, who've been incredible. I've got to say Roger Ganley, a lot of people, you know Roger. He's tireless, Roger. He's been amazing. And AIDA has been so fantastic with helping us with regard to things. So they're the two that have really anchored it. And then there's all these other great organisations that have come in and helped us where we've needed. So thank you so much. Pleasure to present.